Hi, it's Steve Hargadon. We're in day 2 of the 2014 Global Education Conference. I wonder if I've made that mistake before. It is our 5th anniversary of this event, and we are delighted to have Kern Kelley here. Kern, welcome.
Hi there, Steve.
Thanks to the conference sponsors and supporters, with a huge shout out, especially to Iron USA and Global Campaign for Education. We appreciate all of these fine folks. Hope you'll express your appreciation as well as you bump into them here at the conference. For those of you who are participating live, to the left of the map is a set of toolbar icons. You're looking for a star, the star icon, so the second one down. You click on it twice and then click on the map. You can let us know from where you're participating. North America, South America, Africa. Do put a note in the chat, especially as we go along, so that people have some sense of where you are. It's turning out to be a cold, clear day in North Carolina in the United States. Staying in the 20s today, Fahrenheit that is. So we're going to move forward from the map, but do keep putting notes in the chat if you would. So quickly, I'd like to introduce Kern. He started his career as an elementary teacher at Parawai. Is that how you say it, Kern?
Yeah, it is.
Parawai School?
New Zealand, yes. Yep.
In New Zealand. He's presently the educational technologist at Regional School Unit number 19. Now, that's not nearly as cool a name as Parawai, right? In Central Maine. He has provided support to educators for over a decade and has conducted professional development around the world. He has always loved working with students with a special focus on having them teach others. He advises student presenters in a weekly live tech support show broadcast on techsherpas.org. He is the ACTEM's 2013 Educator of the Year. He has brought his student presenters to numerous conferences, including ACTEM, Alan November's Building Learning Communities, and the Google Teacher Academy. Kern, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let us know if we can help you in any way.
Terrific. Thanks a lot, Steve. So I'll introduce myself a little bit more. I'm going to have a class actually joining us, and part of my role as an educator here in my district I work with is to provide opportunities for our kids. And one of the opportunities, of course, is meeting all kinds of wonderful people from all over the world. So at some point, I'll have some of my students here pipe in and kind of join us in this conversation. That's always a good thing. Any of the links that I share or any of the work that I share, if you see any resources or whatever, it's all Creative Commons, all available. The shortcut link to find it is bit.ly/students-as-tech-support. That's all one word, all lowercase. It is cap sensitive, so it doesn't make a difference. So bit.ly/students-as-tech-support. And that'll bring you to my page that has more resources that I share throughout this session. So we'll talk a little bit about, whoops, we jumped. Let's move it out of order. That's okay. So here I am with my 2 boys. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. They keep me very busy. And it's fun to see a lot of the technologies as they're changing through their eyes. And of course, we talk about as students as tech support, we learn a lot from our kids. We learn a lot from them as they're, figuring things out, and they typically seem to figure out things a little bit quicker than we do even. And then of course, kind of putting them in a situation where they're helping us. So here I am in Maine. We mentioned how it was chilly here. We actually already had our first snow day. That's right, you've heard me right. We've had our first snow day. It was November 3rd. It's the earliest one that I can remember. Maybe there's been other ones since then, but that was our first one. We had about 4.5, 5 inches of snow, and one of our schools lost power for the day, so we had the whole day off, which was pretty early, but of course the kids, we're used to it up here in Central Maine. The district I work in is right in smack dab in the middle of the state of Maine. It's about K-12 district. We have about 3,000 students, and we use, devices and technology, K-12 all the way through. We actually have Google accounts for our kids all the way through, starting as young as pre-K. And it's not that our pre-K kids are logging into their accounts per se, but we're using them to store their digital portfolios. That's where they start their work in pre-K, and we have other students that help them. They start their work there, and then from there they're able to, it follows them all the way through. In fact, our accounts follow our kids all the way from pre-K up to 12th grade, where they actually, our senior class gift for all of our graduating seniors is each student's own web domain name. So we'll buy each student like, johnsmith.com or, sallyjones.com or whatever their name is, and we'll forward that to their web portfolio. And this is something that they've hopefully been working on for hopefully 12 years. And it's not that their pre-K, work or their very young work is going to be highlighted at that point. Really the idea is that they start their work there and they get in the habit of digitizing their work, organizing it, storing it in a certain way, and then be able to present it when we're all said and done. My personal goal, as far as throughout all the work that I'm doing educationally, is to get as many students teaching technology to as many others as possible. And it's not really about the technology. I'll be very clear about that. The purpose of this is basically to provide an opportunity for my students, for my kids, to teach. Really the idea is that by teaching, of course, they're going to learn better. And a lot of our techiest kids that we work with, the kids that are very, very savvy tech-wise, they know how to run around an iPad, they know how to run around the internet, better than we do. What we're going to give them is exposure and experiences to things that they wouldn't find otherwise. To learn how to be professional, to learn how to speak in front of others, to learn how to, do what we want them to do. And what this is basically almost an excuse or a rationale to be able to present that. It's culturally okay in education for us to learn about how to, for other teachers to learn from their students, no problem with technology. Sometimes other content areas doesn't work that way. So it's certainly, I think it's a little bit better to do that with technology. I think that our kids are an untapped resource. There's no district or school probably in the world that probably has enough technology support. Between how many IT people they have or how many people they have in general. So for them to be able to have use our students and hopefully use their forces of good rather than evil. We all have minions. Hopefully we can use them to their forces of good and help us out as we go forward and do this stuff with our students. I really want to highlight some of the work that Dr. Mitra has done. Some of you guys have seen his TED Talk and heard about this. The Hole in the Wall project was an amazing thing. This was years ago now, but basically the idea was he put a computer in a wall in an inner city slum in New Delhi and just left it there to see what would happen. And students would find, but basically what they found after a couple years worth of information is that it took students about 8 minutes to learn how to browse, to teach themselves how to browse. So really what that proved to me and really showed to me was it wasn't the idea that kids weren't inherently creative or could figure this stuff out on their own. What they didn't have is the wisdom that went along with that and have that experience. And that's really where we came in. We've also heard about the one laptop per child, and it's kind of an interesting factoid that came in recently is that they do this in Ethiopia. They actually left boxes worth of the one laptop per child there to see what would happen with the kids that had access to them. And what they found was that they would actually take the laptops out and teach themselves how to use them. They actually had no experience with these. Most of them hadn't, seen the written word per se, but they were able to take the laptops out, figure out how to use them, and basically when they went back about 5 months later, they found the average student was using 48 apps on their own. They had taught themselves how to use. They hacked the OLPCs. And the reason why they said they hacked, they actually, when they found the machines, they hadn't turned on the camera. So the kids were actually able to go in on their own and turn the camera on. They actually had to go into the code themselves to be able to turn it on, which is pretty amazing to think about it. When they left the devices, they actually thought that they were going to be playing with the boxes when they had it all said and done. But they found out the kids were able to figure them out and then went back and provided more support afterward. For me, ultimately, technology and education does come down to trust. The idea that when we talk about this technology, we're trusting our kids. We're trusting them to, use it appropriately, use it effectively, go where they're supposed to go. And that's a hard thing sometimes for educators. We're so used to kind of being, in charge, kind of up on the stage there. So when we actually have a situation where we're handing over that control or handing over that trust, that's an uncomfortable place for us to be. The reality is it's kind of inevitable, right? Our kids are doing this stuff outside of school. They have internet access at home, say, or they have resources, they have machines now. Less than ever is it a problem with them finding devices. I find more and more of my students who, it's not that they don't have internet, it's that they, for example, maybe only have a cell phone at home rather than have the entire internet. So when we talk about trust, that's what we're talking about. Then they have this access, and we're actually providing them support to learn how to use it. I hope this isn't anyone's classroom that you know. The idea of, kind of like we talk about them not cheating, right? Not plagiarizing. And so it's not that we want them that, it's that we really have to live in the world we're in. So they have to learn how to be able to work and affect of the technology devices that they have. Ultimately, when we talk about trust, we're really talking about control and who has it. The analogy I make, I mentioned I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and someday they're going to drive, right? They're going to be 16 years old, and that's kind of the number one thing in their mind is when they get 16 years old, they're going to get their license, and they can't wait. In the United States, it's 16. And when we do that, we don't take our kids in a parking lot, and we don't drive them around in a circle. We actually drive around, on the road. We sit beside them. In the state of Maine, we actually sit beside them for 70 hours. We actually have to ride with them and make sure that they're obeying the laws and doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so our kids aren't 16, however, when they're starting to use the internet. They're actually 5 and 6 or 7. I mentioned my 6-year-old. He's very savvy on the internet. He's very savvy on devices. I don't think he has a Facebook account that I know about. Hopefully not. But that's what we want to do is basically put him in very safe analogy, very safe experiences where we can be with them and we can work with them. So when they're all said and done, they've had that experience. It's not the first time that something bad has happened. Because we know when they drive those vehicles, they're going to go off on their own at some point. They're going to drive off and they're going to be by themselves, and something bad's going to happen. A guy's going to cut them off, or a dog's going to run in front of them, or something. And hopefully, we've given them enough experience that they know what to do. And the same thing with the internet, same thing with technology, is we want to give them enough experience so they know what to do at that point. What happens when our students have this control and have this access to the technology? We have one teacher in our district, a 4th grade teacher, who's replaced all of her chairs with these balls, these kind of exercise balls, and the kids sit on them. Yeah, and it's funny because we made the joke when she rolled these out, no pun intended, that she was going to have 100% more ball-related incidents in her classroom than she did before, because of course the kids now have these as an issue. Now, to me, this really was a metaphor for technology. When we introduce technology, there will be new problems that didn't exist before, inevitably, no matter what you do. When you have laptops, when you have new devices, there'll be more things, more problems with those. And sometimes it's easy for our teachers or our educators to say, like, oh, you know what, it's not worth the headache. And sadly, that's kind of one attitude that happens. And so hopefully what we're actually doing is getting them to experience so that they are tasting it in a very safe environment. If they make mistakes at school, that's perfectly okay. That's where we want them to make mistakes so that they will learn from them. They're probably not getting a lot of experience at home. Mom and dad are probably, helping with technology. Sometimes they are. But as often as not, when I ask my students, which of them, are they the tech support for their parents? They're usually the ones that help them set up the security, right? They're the ones that are actually helping them set up this stuff. So hopefully we're actually able to put them in an environment at school where they're, make mistakes, learn from them, and be able to move on. A couple of years back, I was on a panel with Sal Khan. Probably many of you know Khan Academy. And so one of the things that he said, as you know, of Khan Academy, they do, I don't know now, probably tens of thousands of videos. And it's really an environment for students to self-teach. They go and they're able to basically watch videos and kind of teach themselves and move on. But the most interesting thing that he said during our session was we found that the most effective way for kids to learn was by teaching each other. And that's really amazing when you think about that. That's really kind of a little bit counterintuitive to how they built their model. Their model was for them to be able to, actually basically teach themselves. But when they are teaching other kids, they're learning even better. And of course, we know that as educators, right? When we have to teach a subject, we have to teach content, we know that, how important it is for us to know our stuff cold. And so when our kids are put in the experience to be able to teach others, it's better for everybody. And so I asked, I kind of put that out there to the group, put that out there to the world, our educators around the world, how often are you having your students teach other people, either maybe you or maybe other students or maybe teaching other students around the world? It's so easy now. It's easier than ever for us to be able to work together to collaborate across time and space. So hopefully we're really making a conscious effort to do that and really be able to make sure that our kids have that experience. To me, this is kind of the idea of a flipped classroom. This is one of my students down at one of our conferences in Boston, and he's actually teaching a group of kids, teach a group of adults. And they came up to him afterward, and again, he's one of my techier students, and it's not that I'm going to teach him tech stuff. That's not really what my role is there. It's for me to be able to allow him to have the experience and to have opportunities that he wouldn't be able to have otherwise, to be able to showcase his ability and his skills. So a couple years back, 2 years back, in 2012, I was approached by Google. We were doing a thing called the Google Teacher Academy, and they do these now all over the world. They have like 4 or 5 a year now, virtually everywhere in the world. And so we were having one in New York, and they asked me about coming down to present, and I said, I'll come if I can bring students with me. And they said, sure. So I was able to bring 3 students with me, and we went down and they presented. And one of the cool things was they presented before the CFO of Google. So the gentleman who's worth, he is in control of $45 billion. My students basically opened for him, so I thought that was pretty cool. But they talked about the work that we do in our district and the work that they do as educators, as teachers themselves, and how they help other students and teachers and so forth. And one of the things that on the ride back, when you go to the Google Teacher Academy, one of the expectations is that you will do something beyond that day. You'll do what's called a teacher action plan, where you'll actually take this information, you'll go and you'll do something with it. And so I asked the kids, we were actually on the train ride back from New York, heading up to Maine, and one of them said, you know what, Mr. Kelley, we should do something. We should do a student action. We should do something where we actually give back to our community. We do something. I said, great. What do you want to do? That sounds like a great idea. What are you thinking? So we tossed ideas back and forth. And one of the ways that they did is they came up with this thing called the Tech Sherpa. Now, one of the reasons why they used the name Tech Sherpa is because the domain was available. They actually bought the domain on the train ride home on the Wi-Fi. So they were able to buy that and reserved it right there. And they found the techsherpas.org. And they actually designed the logo right there at the same time on the train ride home. And the idea would be is that we would do a weekly live tech help show. So every week at Tuesdays at 3 o'clock, my students would go on live, and they would we use Google Hangouts for that because it's pretty easy to use, and they already have Google accounts. And they go on and they basically do tech support. And so what will happen is if you go to techsherpas.org, you'll see there's a place to ask questions, and we get questions from educators from all over the world, and they'll ask things like, how do you do X, Y, and Z? It doesn't have to be Google related, it can really be anything. And we get a lot of questions, from people from everywhere, and my students will spend the week doing, basically researching the answers to that question for the next Tuesday. And the plan for them is that the next Tuesday they'll do a live tutorial. Sometimes we'll have people from around the world will join us and actually, join in the conversation. We'll go back and forth. Sometimes it's simply my students presenting to them. And so what will happen is they will actually, do that tutorial, do the templates for them, and when they're done, the teacher from wherever they were will have a live tutorial they can actually watch and follow step by step on that question that they asked. This is one of our, I'm not going to play it right here, but this is actually one of our Tech Sherpa shows where the students come on. It's not the same students. Some people ask me, is it the same 3 students? And it's not. One of them has actually graduated and moved on. And so every year I have students from all over, from all over the district that will come in and join us. Sometimes it's at the high school, sometimes it's at the elementary school or middle school. We kind of roll around. The big thing is that we go every week. We try to be consistent about which day of the week it is. Tuesdays at 3. Certainly summer is a little bit less, active than during the school year. The idea is we build our repository of all of our different videos, and they're all archived, and they're all listed by the topics, so that people can go on and, if they want to find an answer to a question we've already answered, they can go back and watch that video. Since then, my students have kind of, expanded their wings and kind of moved on, and now they're doing workshops, doing presentations. This is one of my students here. This was a sophomore at the time, and he's presenting. You can't see this, all the audience there, but there's a couple hundred people there. But he's presenting about the Tech Sherpa show and how that works and so forth. And so again, the whole purpose of this is to, be an opportunity for them to be able to do this kind of thing. We were fortunate, about a month ago, we were up in Ottawa, Canada, and we were asked to go to the largest Google Summit that's been so far, about 1,400 teachers. So here are 2 of my high school students, and they are presenting to 1,400 educators, Canadian educators at the same time. They're doing what's called a demo slam. And the cool thing about that is if you think about it, how often do even we get to be able to present to 1,400 people at once? And that experience, that exposure, this video we have, the whole video is the entire presentation, they will absolutely be able to use in a resume, right? If they say, are you comfortable working with other people? Are you comfortable, speaking in front of people? Speaking in front of people and doing presentations is one of those things that it's kind of like foul shots. You really have to do it to be good at it. You can't, read about it. You can't look at a video and say, oh yeah, I saw it done. Now I know how to do it. You have to practice it. And so every opportunity we have for our students to be able to get up in front of 1,000 people and present, we're doing that. We're capitalizing on that. So this expanded once we started going, basically weekly shows, and we had more and more people ask us about, how we're doing it and asking us questions and us providing tech support. A local community college, and this is about half an hour away from us, maybe 45 minutes away from our school, Central Maine Community College, contacted us, and they really liked the work that our kids were doing, so they actually asked us and some of my students to be tech support for their courses. So 2 of my high school kids right now are the tech support for some of the teachers at Central Maine Community College. Again, they do that live weekly tech show, and they contact them and they get questions, directly. They get to the point where they set up their own custom site, so the students or teachers from the community college can contact them and send a tutorial request like, hey, we want to know how to do X, Y, or Z, and my kids will build a actual tutorial just specific for them. Of course, it's a win-win for both. It's a win-win for the teachers because they get the help. It's a win-win for my students because they get the experience and how to do it. The technology we use, some people ask us sometimes, we're using a lot of Google tools, obviously, because they're free and pretty ubiquitous. That's what they have at the community college, and that's what we have. But we also use a program called Camtasia. And the reason why this was beneficial is you really can customize the tutorials. You can actually put a lot of detail in them. You can put, highlight certain pieces. It's really, high-end piece of software. We were lucky enough to be donated this by TechSmith, and they donated the software for us, and my kids have really run with it and done a lot of work with it. Since then, because they kind of did so much stuff, TechSmith sent us to TCEA, which is in Texas, an education conference. So these are two of my students that were able to go. In some cases, this was the first time that my students could go with. Again, that's an opportunity for them to be able to present and be able to speak in front of other people. So this was down in Texas with them earlier this year. So if you are interested in starting a tech team, and that's kind of what your role is, I get that question a lot. How do I start one? Where do I start? What do I do? The first link I'm going to send you to is, and actually I don't think I have the link here. Let's see. Is teach2learn.org. And what that website does, teach2learn.org does, is it is a place where I've started collecting. I have a lot of places around the world that will ask me, like, oh, how do you start a tech team? Or, can we connect with your tech team and so forth. So it's a website that basically, all it does is it basically collaborates all kinds of different technology, teams or groups or student groups around the world, and they'll join us, and sometimes we'll just do, video chats, or sometimes we'll do emails back and forth, or whatever it is. It's just a place to have a kind of a best practices and central location that different tech teams around the world can collaborate. So some of the questions that I get, frequently asked questions, or a fact almost. One of them is who's in the room, like who do you get to join the tech team or participate. I'm very clear about that. It's not necessarily the techiest kids have to be involved in this. Sometimes it can just be kids that are just interested. The number one and really only criteria that I have with the students that get to work with us and do this kind of cool stuff and go on trips and all that stuff is I have to be able to trust them implicitly. We talked about that trust. We talked about technology being trust, and this idea where the kids themselves, when I go to a conference or I take them somewhere, sometimes people spend a lot of money for them to be there, and they have to be not only on their best behavior, they have to really be showing their best work at all times. And so that trust factor, not when somebody's around, but when an adult's not around, is really important with that. Another question I get a lot is, the time and place, how does this work? And I do think it's important to have a set time each week, or maybe every other week, or twice a week, or whatever it is that's consistent. And it's also important for them to have a place to go. So it's not just a, a random meeting of, in the hallway. It's actually set that they're going to meet at a certain place. And that way they know, it's a group that we're going to be a little bit more, interested in. Also, the work itself. One thing I get a lot of questions about is, what if you have a tech team that's just going to help teachers, as needed? And that's okay, but what happens is there's a lot of downtime with that. When teachers are like, they don't necessarily have a question at this point, so they're kind of sitting there and they're kind of twiddling their thumbs. So it's really important that you have projects that kids can be working on pretty much at any time, that as they're working on them, they're always working on something, and then at some point, teachers will be able to say, oh, now I have something more for you to work on. So it's really important to have something. One of the things that we use, because I have a backup plan, if they don't have anything else to work on, is their portfolios. They can always be adding to their own digital portfolios that they're going to share later on anyway. Another thing that's really crucial is you're going to share your resources. Any of the work that's done is you really need to have a web-based resource, or something, either a web page or website, or some way for other people in other places to be able to contact you, not just an email address, and actually web presence. So that's a really crucial part of this. And ideally, if you can get a domain name that's available, that's even better. One of the questions that I see right here in the chat room is, are the students mobile? And another question kind of to follow that up is I get a lot is, what if a student gets pulled out of class, or how does that work? And the answer is it can happen. It doesn't work for all of our students. Some of our students get pulled out. But what will happen is I have individual students who are responsible enough and considering enough to be able to handle that responsibility of being asked to leave their classroom at some point, go to another classroom and help a teacher. Now, what that means is when the other kids see them and realize that they are able to go and able to actually leave, their classroom, they have to be responsible enough to handle that. So they can say, you know what, Mr. Smith, can I go now because I can make this work up later on, or no, you know what, I actually can't leave right now. And we only have a very select few students that can actually handle that responsibility, but all the students know that it's available to them, so they kind of see that as something to work for and strive for. A couple other questions that we get a lot. Do your students receive community service, or is it voluntary? We do have a senior project where they do have to do community service, so they do receive credit for that. But I also have a lot of students that just join because they want to be part of it. It's not necessarily only for credit. It doesn't take a lot. You know, if they're the first group of kids that get to open the new iPads, for example, or whatever it is, that's usually worth, you know, enough for them to be able to be there. So it doesn't have to be something where they're actually getting, you know, credit or all the time. At our high school level, our seniors, again, because they have to do community service anyway, they usually count that. It could be simple as them, you know, creating web pages for teachers, or it could be something as simple as, you know, them just helping other teachers, or something more involved. We're actually doing programming and doing kind of more detailed stuff. The other question, if they receive credit, do we also work on any kind of certification? And the answer is also yes. I have a couple students that are working to become Google certified. They have the testing, and the question I had for Google was, you know, if they do the testing and if they show that they've done trainings, will they be able to get the application? And they said they think they'll be able to go through with that. And some of my students are also working towards Microsoft accreditation for the A+ testing as well. And that's more of a case-by-case basis if they want to go for that, what their interests are. Pretty much they have a little bit more open reign. If they're, you know, when they leave school, when they leave high school, if they want to go into graphic design, then their project would be revolved around graphic design. Or if they want to go into mobile design, you know, mobile development, then their project would be around that. So it really depends on what they want to focus on. Who provides supervision? Typically it's me. Again, there's some other teachers that I work with that will help out. But again, I really stress that it's important that the kids that we have, that we work with these tech teams, are trustworthy. I do have some students at the high school right now that really want to participate in this. They really want to join us and be part of this project, these groups that we work with. We go on, you know, trips and we do conferences and so forth. But I have some students in particular that I know I won't be able to trust. And I've had that conversation with them. I sat down with them and said, you know, this is a teachable moment. You know, I need to be able to trust you, and I can't right now. What are you going to be able to do as a person to kind of, you know, earn that trust back? And it's, you know, it's one of those things. It's a learning curve, right? So they want to be there. They really think they should be able to be there. They have the tech skills, but they need to be able to learn how to be able to be trustworthy. And so that's just one of the things they have to learn how to do. What kind of responsibilities do they have? Again, there's a real wide range of them. As far as, you know, do they fix computers? Sure. Do they, you know, work with teachers? Absolutely. One of the things I'm careful to do is not put our students in a situation that, even though it's nothing that they did themselves, but that they're not going to get in trouble for. I'll give you a good example. A few years back, we had a really bright student, really way better technology stuff than I am. Really bright. Actually, he's at MIT now, and he really wanted the admin password, not because he would do anything negative with it, and I'm sure of that. I really trusted him completely, and I know he wouldn't do anything, you know, untoward with that responsibility. But what I said to him, I said, look, if you have that password, then even if something goes wrong that you didn't do, you're going to get in trouble for it, even though you didn't have anything to do with it. Because, well, you could have done it, so you might get, you know, kind of set yourself up. So I'm really careful not to set our students up to a situation where, even if there's no control of their own, something bad could happen. So that's a really important part of this. And also they kind of follow up with that, are they given enhanced network privilege? And that's the answer to that, no. The answer is no. I really want to make sure that they're not in a situation where if something goes wrong, they could be considered that they did it, even though it wasn't their problem, it wasn't their fault. The other thing, part of that is it's really important, is that they're not given what would be considered menial labor. They're not, you know, cheap help, basically. They're actually there to learn something. So I had that situation before where I had students who were really fantastic workers. They really were going to do great stuff. I worked with a lot with them, and they were going to work in the summertime. And at the time, I had, you know, an IT person say, hey, you know, who do you have? Are you available? And I handed them some kids. I said, these guys are great. And I talked to them a couple months later, and I asked them, how to go, guys? And they said, well, it didn't go very well because we were just expected to do all the cleanup. Like, they would go into a room and say, okay, you know, spend a half an hour and clean up all this work that's here. And, you know, the kids don't really want that either. They want it. They don't mind doing that sometimes, but they also want to do the fun stuff too. So it's really important that they're not just given as, you know, kind of the grunt labor. They actually have some higher responsibilities and stuff they can do as well. How they integrate, again, my tech staff loves them. They use them any chance they can that works out. It's really a fantastic kind of, another set of hands, right? Not only is it another set of hands, they want to be there. They really want to help out. They really want to be part of the solution. And if you get those students that otherwise, would be curious and again, maybe part of the problem, you want to make sure they have, they're with you, but they're actually learning, how to do stuff the right way and why. And if it affects them, when they see something going wrong, if they see kids, messing with the network, whatever it is, they're more likely to jump in and deal with it as well, because they know that they're going to have to help clean it up as well. I mentioned the bike analogy. This is a big summer for the Kelley family. My youngest, my 6-year-old, lost his training wheels. I had to take them off. And again, I think about that with the work that we have our kids do. Are we putting them in experiences where they learn how to behave and how not to behave and what happens in a very safe environment? So it's not, they're just doing this at home on their own. They're actually getting, learning how to do this with help, with us there. It's a scary place for us to be, right? Just like when the first time I watched my son ride off without his training wheels and what happens if something goes wrong, because things do go wrong. But we have to be able to deal with that as well and kind of move forward and not just say, you know what, we're afraid of something happening, so therefore we're not going to even try it, and it's just not going to work. Because again, our kids can't be, out in college the first time they have to deal with this stuff. They have to be able to, be able to work and be able to learn how to do this. Another question that's in the chat room now: when do they typically work? We actually at the high school level have a set class for this. We actually have class times like a study hall, but they can come in and work with us. And then of course a lot of work's done, after school or weekends and that kind of stuff. And as much of our work is done virtually as possible as well. And that way that they can do it from home or whatever it is. Because we have one-to-one from 7th grade on, our kids are able to use their laptops, and so that really helps as far as devices go. They don't have to really worry about that as far as us having machines. So a couple other resources. This is the website, studentshowcase.org. Again, this is one of our own websites in our district. Twice a year, we actually do a student showcase. So the kids come into school. We typically do it on a Saturday. We don't do it on a weekday, because what we want is the impression. We want our parents to come in, hopefully come in on the weekend and see this as a real fun and exciting place to be. So we really do it. We give away prizes. We have video games in the gym. We have lots of kind of fun activities for them to do. Really, the whole purpose of this is for our parents to come in and say, "Wow, I didn't realize you get to use all this really cool, fun technology at school." And so the last couple of years, I think we're on our 9th annual one. If you go to that website, you'll see. And again, we've given away things like laptops and Kindles and all that kind of cool stuff. And the idea is that when we do this is we bring parents in. We've actually had parents that leave and say, "Okay, I'm going to be right back." And these are parents that have never come in really for anything, for student like conferences or something like that. But they come in for these showcases because they really want to be part of this, and it's really an exciting, activity for them to be part of. So I highly recommend doing that. The reason why we do have technology in there, but it's really meant to be a student showcase, not necessarily a technology one. So whatever cool, fun things the kids are doing, and it doesn't have to be academic related, just really something that shows off what they're able to do. That's the purpose of it, to get them to feel good about school and the parents feel good about where their kids are going to learn. These are some of the other tech groups. As I mentioned, these are from all over the world, and these are some of the ones that we've connected with, either virtually or physically. We actually was fortunate enough in October to go to, September, went to see the Tech Crusaders. That's a group that's out in Korea, in the American school there in South Korea, in Seoul. And that was a fantastic opportunity. I actually had my son who was able to meet them and kind of chat with them. And the funny thing was, he's 9, and he said, "Wow, Dad, they actually use the same stuff we do." Because, of course, a lot of conversations about Minecraft or about, what you use to watch, that's YouTube videos or that kind of stuff. So it really kind of brings the world, a little bit smaller, really kind of connects across time and space. And the more opportunities that we're able to do that, the better it is for everyone. The Teach to Learn site, that's what I mentioned, where we bring all those different groups together. And again, it was actually a project of one of my students. One of my students said, "You know what, we really should have a place where, all these kids are asking us questions, but we should put them there." So this was just a website that one of my students created and kind of added to. And as they are, more student groups join us, and kind of connect with us, we'll just keep putting them there. And I'd love to have, if you know of one or want to join us, please, just put that information there and we'll connect you. And it's really just a place to put best practices and a place for, educators to connect and say, "Hey, I have a student group," or "I would like to start a student group," or, "What do we do?" and kind of learn from each other. And so with that, if you have any questions beyond today, please join us, techsherpas.org. It is on Tuesdays at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. It's in the United States. And if you don't want to join us live, we all have all of our old, shows archives. If you have any questions, please feel free to go on there and add the questions, and we'll be able to, my kids will work for the week and put up the following week what hopefully the answers are to that. And if you have any questions now, I'm more than happy to spend the last few minutes that we have answering live questions or questions that are on the chat, if I can scroll through and find some. I'm just looking for the chat right now, looking for questions. Oh, one of the questions are the students mobile. And yes, the answer is yes. They can move about during the day depending on what the situation is, more so at the high school than at the elementary schools. However, at our youngest schools, one of our schools that I work with is K through 8. And so we have quite a few older students, like 7th and 8th graders, that will go down and work with the younger kids. And the purpose of that, I mentioned earlier how we have digital portfolios. So the purpose of that is the kids will actually go on and they'll go down and they'll help the younger kids digitize their work. It might be recording a video, it might be, taking a picture of some of the work they've done, whatever that is. In fact, one instance we had the kids go down and they took a book, the younger kids, I think it was a pre-K class, that had written, and they scanned each page, they took pictures of each page and made a Google presentation out of them. So now the kids have that copy of that. And so the idea that the older kids are going down and helping them out, obviously, and really a big part of that is the teachers don't have to spend a lot of time, doing kind of the busy work of just digitizing work. It can be older kids going down. So it's at the point now where some of my older kids, some of my 8th grade kids, I won't get an email. They'll go directly to them, and they'll say, hey, are you available during your study hall? Can you come down? The student will go down, work with the teacher, just get the recordings or get the video or the whatever they need, and then at the end of it, the teacher will have it uploaded and just be there. So the teacher really doesn't have to take much time or any time at all, and then eventually we get to the point where the kids are doing it themselves. I personally found about 3rd to 4th grade, and that's about, let's say, 9 to 10-year-olds, can kind of take over that ownership of digitizing their own work. It's more difficult, I think, for younger kids, for 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade. Some of the tools that we use to deal with that, one of the tools is called a iFi. That's an EYE-FI. I'll put that in the chat. And what that is it's an SD card. If you have digital cameras, any of your digital cameras you probably have a limited amount in your school, and so what ends up happening is what we call the digital camera dance, where one teacher will have the camera and then they'll share it with the other teacher if they're not sure if they can download the pictures off of it, and they have an SD card, and it kind of gets to be a real mess. So what an iFi does is it wirelessly, it's an SD card that has Wi-Fi built into it, so it will wirelessly upload those pictures as soon as you take them. We use them at some of our middle schools for like the yearbooks. The kids or the teachers will take pictures, and as they're taking the pictures, they're automatically getting uploaded to an individual spot. That way the teacher doesn't have to chase around after the pictures all the time. They can just basically, just have them all go to the same location. We actually use a single account for that. So they all go to the same Google account, and that account is stored, and then at the end of the year, all the pictures are already there. They're not a lot more expensive than a regular SD card. They're a little bit more expensive, and once you have them, you have to set them up the first time, but once they're set up, they're pretty seamless. So we use those as much as possible throughout our district. Another option, another question that came up, somebody asked about how do you prioritize which questions come in. And generally, if there's a question that people say like, oh, which one over another ones, it's more of just like a catch as catch can. Like I might look at 2 questions and say, oh yeah, this one's an easy one. Johnny, can you go fix this one for this person because I know you know how to do it. But it's really important too that our students realize that they absolutely do not have to know nor are expected to know the answer to all the questions. They may go talk to a teacher, and the teacher will ask them questions that they don't know the answer to. So be it. That's an opportunity to go learn about that thing, and they can come back to me and say, hey, I didn't know how to do this. Can you tell me, Mr. Kelley, or can we figure it out, or whatever it is. And I think that that's a really important point, that it's absolutely in technology always going to be the case where there's always going to be something new coming down, the pike, right? There's always going to be something else that we don't know. So it's just important for the kids to realize it's okay if they're not sure the first time, they don't have the answer to that question. One of the other questions came up is, do you ever think of doing this as a formal class? And yes, at the high school level, we do have it as a formalized class that kids can sign up for and take. At the middle and younger grades, it's not. It's basically more kind of catch as catch can. And I think that works fine. We give credit to high school because the kids are doing a lot of work. They're doing community service, certainly. They're doing, they're doing tech work, obviously. But at the middle school level, I think it's fine for them to do it as necessary. One thing that happens at the high school that's a little bit different than middle school is, they typically have less time in the sense They have, they discovered cars and boyfriends and girlfriends, all kinds of other stuff they didn't really deal with before, usually. So it's less of an issue to find kids at the middle school level than at the high school level. Another question came up is, how do you select students for the tech teams? I'm very straightforward about this with my kids, that I select students by those that I can trust. If I'm able to trust you in front of a group of educators and you're going to work with them and do the right thing, then again, even if you don't know the answer to the question, that's fine, but you're able to deal with it professionally and appropriately, then that's what I'm looking for. Do you have a teachers tech team? That's a great question. I guess, there's a lot of opportunities for teachers who just, can help out. If I know of a teacher who's an expert on a certain topic, I'll certainly, to be able to, I'll certainly connect them with somebody. But one thing I'll do, again, a lot, because I work with all the students in our district pretty much, I'll walk into a classroom and say, hey, I need a student to help me do something. Like, I need a student to help me, help me on my web page. Okay. So I'll walk into a classroom and say, hey, I know in your classroom there's certain students that are there that can do that. I say, hey, why don't you work with Mrs. Smith and help her, with the web page? And sometimes the kids are like, oh, I'm not sure how to do that. I say, no problem. That's what we're going to learn how to do it. And so I'll work with them, and of course they'll learn how to do it in the process, and it's really a win-win for everybody, for the teachers and for the students. Motivation for the 10, again, it doesn't take a lot. I'll give a quick story. In Maine, with our one-to-one program, one of the things that we've done in years past is the background for the laptops are frozen, meaning that they can't change them. And so when this happened, the kids all had a blue background. That was just a standard thing. And one day I went into one of my classes, and I logged in as an administrator. Now the administrator actually has a different background. They have a red background. And the kids went in and they could see the red background and they were astounded, like, oh, how do we get that background? And a lot of them would have done almost anything to have that change of background. So it's a very little thing. It wasn't a big, prize or a big thing. It was just the fact that they could have something different than everybody else. That was enough to motivate them. So if we were able to, do something like, oh, you get the first to open the new iPads, or you're the first to, use a topic or a product or whatever it is, you get to do this stuff, that's usually enough for motivation. All right, I'm just going to scan through and see if there's any other questions. If any of you guys have questions for some of my students, I have students here. Like I mentioned earlier, we are in an 8th grade classroom now. They're all listening and watching the slideshow. But if you have any specific questions for some of the kids, please feel free to ask away. One of the questions, have we used HyperStudio? We have not. One of the things we'll get asked a lot, and I have a lot of kids who come to me and say, hey, I want to do video games. Right? That's a kind of typical either high school or middle school thing. I want to create video games. So we actually work on a process where the kids will go through learning, coding and programming, and then by the end of it, they're actually creating video games and mobile video games and so forth. And that's just a really easy way to get in for kids that may not be interested otherwise. Because of course, gaming is a popular thing. Obviously, our kids want to learn how to do that. So we have kind of a structure where the kids will learn. They end up the last stage. They're working with a program called Unity, which is a free download. It's free to use. It's very graphic. A lot of really big name games that you've heard of before, have been created in it. So it's one of those things that the kids who are really motivated on how to learn how to do it, they can. So that's what Unity 3D is the site. I'll put that in the chat room. As an option if you're trying to get kids motivated that aren't. Another big one that we use, and we've used it more in the middle school last year, we're going to start using it this year, is Minecraft. Of course, Minecraft is huge everywhere. Everybody's heard of it, and some people use it. We had students that we worked with before in one of my other schools that weren't motivated that much, right? And so Minecraft is a way to get them to be involved, and we would basically use that as a platform for them to be able to, if it's language arts, they were writing about it. If it was science, we were doing science projects in it, or so forth. It's sort of the platform to use to kind of keep them engaged and keep them motivated. One of the questions for your students, what is the biggest challenge when working in this type of classroom? One of the things that I think it's really good for our kids to see, but they don't see a lot of, is seeing teachers learn. When I bring my students to a conference, for example, they're looking at 100 or 200 teachers learning. They don't get to see that very often. They don't get to see teachers struggle. And it's okay for them to see that. I think that's really worthwhile, because I think that if they see teachers in that student role, they realize we're in the same boat that they are. And again, we talk about working together rather than kind of, just talking at them, but working with them. And so they're say, okay, wait a second, this is how you figure this stuff out. Technology is new for a lot of their teachers, and that's fine. So it's a really good medium for them to be able to learn how to work together and how to figure it out. See if we have more chat room questions. Somebody mentioned Swivel as a tool. I've seen that before. We have used that. It's a good one. It's basically you can connect it to an iPad and it can follow you as a presenter. There's a lot of tools out there. One thing that it's very clear is, basically whatever tool is, the best for the job. We're not, Mac or PC or Chromebook or iPad or whatever. We have to cut a little bit of everything, whatever works. And so one of the things that I try to do as much as possible when I work with the students is give a project and let them figure out, okay, what's the best tool to figure that out. So it's not just simply teaching the tools per se. Sometimes it's actually just teaching, okay, I need to basically teach myself how to do this. The question, have you tried teaching with co-teaching with a class with a teacher that needs tech instruction? Yes, it's interesting. My official role is a tech integrator, so that's basically what I do. What I find is, it's interesting that a lot of teachers who are just great teachers for their content area, very good at what they do, who are not necessarily tech-minded, aren't interested in, they're like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a great project, but I need to do my thing. So one thing I found is I will talk to the students themselves, and I'll say, okay, what are you doing this month for science, or what are you doing for language arts, or what are you doing for social studies, or whatever. And they'll tell me the projects they're working on or the topics, and then I'll apply technology to my class to a project that they're working on, and almost 99.9% of the time, what I find is that the kids will say, they'll go to their teachers, hey, look what we did, and the teachers love it. Wow, you did this thing about this topic we're learning about. So it's not that they would have said no, it's that they don't think of it ahead of time. But by providing examples of them for them to be able to use, for them to be able to like, oh wow, that's great, that's the way I wanted to do it. That's good for them to be able to, basically to see what it could look like and how it would work. I do have some teachers, obviously, that are far more interested and more able to handle that kind of idea. Like, oh, I see how this could apply across the board, not just for that one project. But that's really a teacher by teacher basis. It's also a student by student basis, where some students are more interested in doing that a techie way. It's not uncommon for me to have kids come to me where they'll say, okay, Miss So-and-so, Miss Smith is, wants to do a book report. Can I do a book report, but can I do it this way? Can I do this website with it? Or can I do this video? Or can I do, this animation or whatever? And that's where I come in to help them do that. And as long as it's okay with the teacher, usually, again, it's a win-win. The teacher loves it, and the students has more, interest in doing the actual work, and so it works out for everybody. One of the questions I have in the chat room is, what's one of the best success stories I've had so far? It is interesting. I'll tell a story, and it's a success story, but not in the way you'd think. One of the things that happens with teachers, especially with educators, is we kind of get in the habit or the assumption that our students know all there is to know about technology because they're very good at it, right? We can give them a laptop, we give them an iPad, and they start zipping around and they know what to do. But it's crucial that we realize as educators that, yes, they have experience. Yes, they're able to click the buttons, but they do not have the wisdom that goes with it. And the best way I can describe this is a trip that I took last year. I went to South Africa for a conference. I was doing a keynote, and I had my son with me. My son was 8 at the time. And while we were there, the time change, of course, is pretty severe. So during the day, he'd be tired because the equivalent of being midnight here. So it wouldn't be uncommon for him to go out and lay down in the back seat of the rent-a-car we had. Again, it was right at his school, so he's basically out in front of the school, and I'd go check on him between sessions and so forth, and he was fine. But what would happen is he'd go and get snacks, and he'd go back lay down, and I'd go check on him in between sessions, and everything was good. Well, at one point, I got an email from him and said, hey, Dad, I'm hot. Could you come roll down a window? And I was very impressed at the time because he figured out to take out his iPad that he had with him, and he figured out how to go to Helen from South Africa remembers this. That's right. So he figured out how to get on the Wi-Fi and email me right at that time, like, oh, Dad, this is the best way to contact me. And so I was really proud of him, like, hey, this is really smart. He figured out how to do this. He had the tech skills, right? So I walked outside. I walked up to the car. I walked up to the rent-a-car, and I opened the door because I had the keys. And I looked at the side, and it was a manual roll down. So for him to open the windows, all he had to do was roll down the window, basically. And the reality was, I looked at him, I said, dude, I pointed to it, and he said, what? I have no idea what that is. So he had never experienced rolling down a window before. Why? Because he'd never been in a car or had a vehicle that we've had that doesn't have buttons. So it's not that obviously he wouldn't know how to do it, but he didn't even think to look there first. And that's really kind of where we come in as educators. It's not that, yes, that's giggling. Somebody asked the giggling in the classroom. Yes, I have my 8th grade class with me right now, so they're all kind of chuckling at my son. The other thing I thought was funny is when I presented this, when I told this story in South Africa to that group of educators, he was in the front row and he raised his hand and he waved to everybody to make sure they knew it was him. That was the one that did it. The thing we talked about is, of course, is that it's not that the kids don't have the technology experience or the wherewithal. It's that they don't have the experience that we have. They don't have the wisdom to how to use these tools. And so that's really where we come in. And so, I joke with some of my educators that, computers, the internet's going to put us out of business. And the answer is no. If a teacher could be replaced by a computer, they should be, right? But if they're capable, if they're adding value that they can't have otherwise, then, that's why we're there. It's why, a textbook would never replace an educator, because it's not just the information itself. It's the presentation, it's the relationship, it's what the work we do with the kids and how that works back. See if we have any other questions here. Again, if you have any other questions for my students in the room, feel free, for them specifically. Oh, I got a question about some of the conferences. One of the ways that we get to conferences and how that works, I've been asked this before, like how do we afford that and how do we pay for that? My students, typically they don't pay for any of the travel. It's all covered. And how we cover that depends on the situation. Sometimes the conference themselves will cover it. For example, one conference we've gone to for years now, I can't remember, probably 10 years, is the Boston, Ellen November's Building Learning Communities Conference in Boston. And my students go down and it's all covered. And they actually, basically they do tech support throughout the conference. So that's kind of the payment for them being there. Is they, help teachers. They help, they run different sessions. They do setup. They do whatever they need to do. And again, it's a good experience for them. We get to stay down in Boston for the week, and they get to run around and see, help out teachers. And one of the running jokes that we have, and this is worth mentioning, is that when they go to the conference, is how many teachers in the room that they're seeing are on Facebook at the time. That's one of the running jokes. Of course, they wouldn't be allowed to be on Facebook in class, but a lot of teachers are on it while they're supposed to be listening. So that's kind of one of our catchphrases. Can you describe the reputation that the tech team has among other students? I don't know. Isaac, you want to jump in on that?
What?
Come over here. So we have one of our students here. Grab a seat. He is a 7th grader right now, and he went with me to Augusta, right? One of the conferences. Okay. So how do you think that the work that you did when you went down was thought of by the rest of the kids in classes?
In classes,
yeah.
They wanted to do it too because I got to miss school. And they bragged.
The brag a little? Yeah, the whole miss school thing. That's a big part, right?
Yes.
Do you think it used to be what was going to be considered the AV club, like, the geeks, right? That was kind of a subculture. Do you think that's the same anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Why not?
They, like in computer class, they'll be thinking, they'll, instead of calling us geeks, they'll say, they'll call us geeks until they need help. And then they'll act all nice, and they'll be like, oh yeah, you do this.
Yes. No matter what you do, they always need help from a geek, right?
Yeah.
The running joke we have at the high school is call me nerd today, call me boss tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? That's the idea, right? Because everything is technology now. And the other thing I find, especially at the high school too, is it's not just the stereotypical geeks or whatever. It's that it's everything. It's very mainstream. Everyone pretty much has a cell phone or something digital that they're communicating with. So it's not a case of it's only a subculture anymore. We actually had a couple of years back. I went to the captain of the basketball team, who I was friendly with, and I said, hey, you're taking our tech team class. And he's like, I don't know anything about it. I said, don't worry about it. I'll teach you. And so he joined us, and he did very successful at it. And again, it was the idea of showing, like, look, it's not just certain kids that are doing this. It's all kids. One of the questions is how long we've been working with the tech team. You've just been doing it for a couple of years, basically, right? But I have kids that have done it since really 5th grade is when we start officially having kids join, and I really make sure to have a lot of different examples for them, a lot of different opportunities for them where they can do the live tech help show once a week, or they can go to local conferences, or the big one we got invited this year to go to ITSD. So my students will be flying down, and they'll be going to Philadelphia and presenting there. Again, we're going to be presenting on Students as Tech Support. But they will be, and so again, you don't get to start there. You don't get to start, if you think about a winning sports team at a high school level, you can't start that at the senior year. You actually have to start, quote unquote, scouting or recruiting younger. So I work with kids all the way go through, and so we start, very young. I know kids 4th, 3rd, maybe 2nd grade that I work with, and by the time they get to high school, I've worked with them for a long time. I know what they're capable of and how good they are and savvy they are presenting and so forth. And so those are the ones that would get to go to, on the trip to Italy, for example, or the trip to, like I said, we went to Ottawa about a month ago. One of the questions, any students going to Orlando FETC? And I'm afraid not. I'm not going to FETC this year. So, but there's always next year, right? Maybe next year we'll be able to make it down there. So that's basically my time. If I have any more questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap it up. And thank you all very much. I appreciate it. I don't know if, Steve, if I have to click stop the recording or if we're all done.